In the early decades of the 20th century, the United States called itself a land of freedom. But for millions of its own citizens, freedom existed only in words, not in life. Across the South, Jim Crow laws built a world of enforced separation. Schools, buses, restaurants, hospitals, neighborhoods, every space divided, every rule designed to send the same message. Your rights are conditional, your dignity negotiable, your humanity denied. A black child could learn rejection before understanding its meaning. One day playing with a white friend, the next day told it must stop, because the world had decided skin color was a boundary no innocence could cross. A black passenger could step onto a bus, see empty seats in front, and still be ordered to the back. Speaking up was dangerous. Silence was safer. And sometimes, even silence was not enough. Into this world on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, a child was born. His name was Michael King, Jr. His father, a Baptist preacher with unshakable self-respect, later changed both their names after being inspired by the reformer Martin Luther. That child would become Martin Luther King, Jr., a man whose voice would force a nation to confront itself. Martin grew up in a home rooted in faith and discipline, in a thriving black community known as Sweet Auburn. His mother, Alberta Williams King, filled the house with music and warmth. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., filled it with courage. He refused humiliation in any form. If a store treated black customers as lesser, he walked out. He taught his son something simple but radical: never bow your dignity to fear. Still, the world outside the home left scars. At 6 years old, Martin lost a white friend, not to distance or conflict, but to race. He was told they could no longer play together. That moment planted questions that never left him. How can a nation preach liberty while teaching children separation? How can equality exist with conditions attached? As he grew older, those questions sharpened. Why separate water fountains? Why divided buses? Why schools closed to some and open to others? These were not theories. They were daily reminders of exclusion. Martin refused to accept them as normal. Gifted and driven, he skipped grades and entered Morehouse College at just 15. Morehouse was not merely an institution, it was a forge for leadership. Excellence there was expected, not celebrated as rare. Martin studied philosophy, ethics, and theology, but one figure shaped him deeply: Dr. Benjamin Mays. Mays taught that faith without justice was empty and intelligence without courage was meaningless. Martin continued his studies at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he encountered new ideas and a wider world. There, he studied the social gospel, the belief that Christianity must confront injustice, poverty, and suffering, not just comfort souls. He also discovered the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi and realized that nonviolence was not weakness, but controlled power, force without corruption. At Boston University, pursuing his doctorate, Martin met Coretta Scott, a gifted musician with a strong moral compass. Their marriage formed a partnership that would endure extraordinary pressure. By the time Martin returned to the South, he was no longer simply a preacher. He was prepared by discipline, by belief, and by pain. Then Montgomery happened. In 1954, Martin became pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, where segregation was rigid and unapologetic. On buses, black passengers were ordered to the back, forced to surrender seats, treated as expendable. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to comply. Calm, silent, unmoving, she was arrested. That arrest ignited what silence could no longer contain. A one-day bus boycott was called. People walked miles, churches became command centers, carpools became lifelines, and a young Martin Luther King Jr. was chosen to lead the movement, not because he was aggressive, but because he could channel anger without letting it destroy the cause. Threats followed, night after night, then violence. His home was bombed while his wife and child were inside. When an angry crowd gathered, ready to retaliate, Martin stood before them and chose restraint over revenge. He insisted on nonviolence, not as strategy but as principle, because he understood a brutal truth. Once the oppressed mirror the hatred of the oppressor, the moral battle is lost. For 381 days, Montgomery held firm, and then the courts ruled segregation unconstitutional. Black citizens returned to the buses, free to sit where they chose. It was more than a transportation victory. It was proof that disciplined unity could dismantle injustice. Montgomery made King a national figure. Birmingham made him a global one. By 1963, Birmingham, Alabama was segregation at its most violent. Police dogs, fire hoses, beatings. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference confronted the city with nonviolent resistance. He was arrested and jailed. While imprisoned, he responded to critics who urged patience by writing what became Letter from Birmingham Jail. He explained that justice delayed is justice denied, and that unjust laws must be resisted. His words cut through moral complacency. Then the images reached the world. Children attacked by dogs, teenagers slammed by water hoses. The nation could no longer pretend ignorance. Momentum exploded into the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial. King spoke of America's broken promise. Then he set aside his prepared words and spoke from something deeper. I have a dream of children judged by character, a dream of transformation where hatred once ruled. His words echoed across continents. They reshaped America's moral language. Change followed. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Nobel Peace Prize, then Selma, Bloody Sunday, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Yet King saw further. Legal rights meant little without economic dignity. He challenged housing discrimination in Chicago. He spoke against the Vietnam War, calling it a moral disaster that stole from the poor and sacrificed the vulnerable. He refused silence even when it cost him support. In 1968, King planned the Poor People's Campaign. But before it began, he went to Memphis to support striking sanitation workers whose lives had been treated as disposable. Their signs read, "I am a man." On April 3, 1968, he delivered his final speech, calm and resolute, urging unity and nonviolence. The next evening, on April 4th, standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was 39. The nation mourned. The world shook. But his voice did not end. It multiplied. Laws followed. The Fair Housing Act passed. Coretta Scott King carried the mission forward. Martin Luther King Jr. did not change history with force. He changed it with moral courage. He proved that love could be resistance, that discipline could defeat brutality, and that dignity could outlast violence. His legacy is not a holiday. It is a challenge. Because his dream still lives wherever injustice is confronted, wherever dignity is defended, wherever compassion refuses silence. This is the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.